In this video, we will see how to build this kind of page using Breakdance and Elements Hive. While building this page, we will cover how we can build a scroll-based mask reveal effect using the default Breakdance scroll animations. We will also look at one of the ways we can use the WebGL Metaballs extension from Elements Hive, as well as some of the entrance animations included in Elements Hive. First, we will add our Heroes section and give it a descriptive label in the Structure panel. We will give the section a height of 300 VH to create some scrolling room for our mask reveal effect, and set the width to full. And get rid of the default padding. The last thing we want to do here is set the overflow to hidden, since the mask image will be a child of this section and will scale beyond the size of its parent. Next, we need a sticky element that will remain visible while we scroll the section. In this case, we will use a simple div element. We will set the styling such that it covers the whole screen. And then apply the sticky option from the Breakdance Animations feature. Under this sticky wrapper, we will add a video element. The video element will act as our background video, which will be revealed as we scroll. We use a video here, but you can of course use any kind of elements. The technique remains the same. We need the video to cover the whole screen irrespective of the aspect ratio, so we will specify a width and force the height to always be 100% of the viewport. Next, we will add the mask image. In this case, I will use a div element and apply an SVG file as the background. And then style it to always cover the whole screen. Set the position to absolute so that the mask image is on top of the background video. The SVG has some hollow text that allows us to see the content behind the SVG, which in this case is the video that we have. Later, we will see one of the ways one can create these types of mask images using Figma. Looks like I forgot to set the background image settings. Let's do that before we move on to the animation part. Next, we want to create a scale transition using the scroll animation feature of Breakdance. We will set the start value to 1 and the end value to something pretty big. What the end value needs to be depends on the composition of the mask image itself. In this case, I will set it to 80. The most important part is to set both trigger locations to 100. Without this, the scale will take effect even when we are at the top of the page. Now, whenever we scroll, the mask image scales and reveals the video behind it gradually. Due to the text in this image, the X is not in the center, which becomes a problem since the scale is done uniformly. Instead of realigning the text on the image itself, we will reposition the image during scroll using the scrolling animations. Looks better horizontally. Let's do the same for the vertical position. Notice that both trigger locations are set to 100 here as well. Maybe a bit too much. Looks better. Let's change the easing to something more gentle. And make the scrolling effect relative to the hero section using a class selector. And assign the class to the hero section as well. Let's see what it looks like on the front end. As we start scrolling, the mask image scales and reveals the video. We also have enough scrolling room to see several frames of the video after it is fully visible before we get to the next section. Before we build the content section, let's look at one of the ways to create this type of hollow text or shape images using Figma. Start by adding a frame with your chosen size. Then add a rectangle inside the frame of the same size. Then add the text and align it as needed. Finally, choose both the rectangle and the text elements, then apply a subtract Boolean operation. The rectangle can have a solid color or any background type. That's all there is to it. If we change the frame's color to something else, it'll be visible through the text. Then all you need to do is export the layer that is labeled as subtract in SVG or PNG formats. Okay, now let's tackle the content portion of our page. Let's add a new section and give it a descriptive label. Then give it a background color. Note that we already have colors and typography-related styles defined in the global settings for the purpose of this video. Next, we will add an H1 heading. Align the section content to center. Define some top and bottom padding. Next, we will enable the WebGL Metaballs extension from Elements Hive. The WebGL Metaballs extension allows you to create different styles of blob-like interactive backgrounds with different shading modes. In this case, we will try to emulate a metallic-like material using the sci-fi color mode. Let's see what we have so far on the front end. Looks good. If we look at the original page we had, when we scroll to the content section, the background is not immediately visible, but is rather revealed using a mask animation, and the text is then revealed using a liquid-like distortion. Let's start by applying a mask entrance animation to the content section using the entrance animations extension included in Elements Hive. In this case, we want to use circle-style animation and set the direction to down so that the reveal animation runs from the top to bottom. We will also set the duration to something relatively long given the size of the element. Set it so that the animation is triggered once the top of the section reaches 50% of the viewport, and apply some custom easing. We also set the animation to only run once per page load. We can see that the WebGL metaballs are visible through the text on the original page. We do this by setting the mix blend mode of the text to overlay. Next, we will apply the displacement entrance animation from Elements Hive to the heading element. The displacement entrance animation allows you to create different kinds of noise-based distortions. In this case, we want something relatively fluid and gentle. We define the timing settings based on the orchestration that we want. In this case, the heading should start animating after the WebGL metaballs become visible. Let's see what we have so far on the front end. Looks good. Next, we need to add some more text. There is nothing special here, so I will speed up this part. We will add a div container to wrap the content. Then add a heading element, and then add a text element. Lastly, we just style the elements accordingly. In the next part, we have some card elements with the introduction of some services. We will add a div container to wrap the content. Next, we will add a columns element. Each card will be represented using a div element with a heading element and a text element inside of it. Since the styling of all the cards is pretty much the same, we will create a class selector and apply the styling via the selector class instead of each card individually. To give it the see-through look that we have in the demo page, we add a dark background with some opacity. Apply a flex layout, set some padding, a border radius, and a box shadow. The last thing we need is to set a backdrop filter to apply blur and sepia filters. Now that it's done, we can save the selector and create the remaining cards. We duplicate the existing card. Move them over to the right column. For the card on the left, we need it to be 100% height of its parent. For the columns element, we set the breakpoint when the columns start to stack vertically. Give it a size. Then set a gap on the right column. Last thing we need is to add some breathing room between the containers. The last part we need to build is the forms at the end of the page. Again, we will wrap the content in a separate div container and add the basic styling we need. For this part of the content, we need a text element. Next, we will add an advanced tabs element and delete the default tabs and their content. Add a tab content, and then add a form builder element inside of it. Duplicate the tab content for our second tab. Add the tab titles that we need. Set up the fields that we need for both forms. In both cases, the fields don't have any labels and instead use a placeholder to communicate the expected data to the user. Since both forms have the same styling requirements and we don't have any other forms on this site, we can set the form styling via the global settings. The styling of the forms is relatively basic, so we will just speed up this part. Next, we will style the tabs. Again, this is pretty basic stuff, so we will just speed up this part as well. The entrance animations in Elements Hive are also compatible with nestable elements like the advanced tabs. By applying an entrance animation from Elements Hive to the tab content elements inside the advanced tabs, we can initiate a transition every time we switch tabs. In this case, we will use the mask entrance animation with the circle style. The animation needs to be the same, so we will copy and paste the settings over to the second tab content element. And we are done with the page. Let's do a final check and see what it looks like on the front end. Using Breakdance, Elements Hive, and a bit of creativity, we built a pretty unique and modern-looking page without a lot of effort. And the techniques we saw can be implemented independently of each other to new and existing designs alike. I hope you liked it. Let me know in the comments what you think, and I'll see you on the next one.